professional trainer here at CT Solutions, and I felt I should maybe share my insights with regards to account administration. I know that it sounds very, very basic, and it's something that most people have figured out, but believe it or not, I think there's a lot of people out there that have it wrong. Of course, the concepts of creating an account for a person so that this person can log on to a system and access the resources is a pretty easy concept to get, and technically speaking, pretty easy to perform if you're an administrator. Sit down, create a user account, specify a password, and on we go. We can access our local computer and perhaps a few resources that are available there. In terms of accessing resources that are on the network, such as your printer, such as a database, maybe even an internet connection, you might need to belong to some special groups. Not everyone has access to all these resources. And this is where we get a little bit disconnected with regards to account administration. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to spend maybe a minute or two explaining how I see account administration, how it should be performed, and of course, how this might help you in your organizations as you can maybe clean up the mess of account administration that you currently have. So let's talk about the problem first. And this is what I've seen with regards to the administration in a lot of different organizations, government agencies, and corporations alike. And what I've seen is that people get the idea of creating a user account, and they understand that sometimes micromanaging user accounts is not the best approach. So they'll create groups, and they'll add these accounts to groups. And of course, the users, as they belong to these groups, will then be able to access resources to which that group has been granted permissions to. So what I find a little bit difficult here is that that entire group management aspect is the one that is the, I guess, maybe misunderstood or the least well understood of all, I guess, a whole bunch. So what I want to do is I want to talk about group management and start off from the very beginning. So I think that we can all agree that when it comes to account administration, the real important things that we need to know about from the IT side of things is that we are triggered to a certain degree to perform certain tasks. And we're triggered to do these tasks based on what's going on within the business. And we understand that there's a business side of things and there's the IT side of things, and we, of course, need to deal with what's happening on the business side. And so let's talk about one of the key components there on the business side that will have a huge impact on what we do on the IT side, especially with regards to account administration. First off, let's talk about HR and its key role associated with account administration. See, HR is fully familiar as to what goes on with the hiring, or the firing, the promotion or demotion, the special assignments that are assigned to some of the employees within an organization, the movement, just the moving or switching from one department to another department. And so, since they're fully aware of what's going on with the staff, they can let us know in IT exactly what's going on so that we can ensure ourselves that, first off, users do in fact have user accounts. Secondly, these user accounts are managed properly as members of the appropriate groups, and that these groups have the appropriate permissions for whatever resource. So let's just work through that particular problem. So this being said, we have HR sitting up here as a department, and they will trigger activities with the account administration side of things. I'm going to break this down into two pieces. Now the first piece is real important because I'm going to define a role, an administrative role that we have within our organization on the IT side of things so that we can streamline account administration. So I'm going to create a role called account administrators, or account admins for short. Now the account admins are going to participate in this process of creating accounts, adding these accounts to groups, changing the properties associated with the account so that the attributes or the properties better reflect that person's actual role within the organization. Whether they're an engineer, whether they work in production, whether they work in accounting or financing, no matter what the role, we can properly organize that information as we should. So account admins will get some sort of trigger from HR identifying that there's a new employee, or that an existing employee has been retired, or maybe that this employee has a new role within the organization, and we have to, once again, manage that account accordingly. So this being said, what we're going to do is if we're going to need to create an account, then I'm going to create an account, and I'm just going to label this as the A, the account that needs to be created, managed, or modified, whatever is required for us as administrators. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the requirements that have been stipulated by HR. Now, they know what we need to do with this user, so they're letting us know that this person is now in accounting. Or more specifically, maybe they're in the accounts payable department. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create a group, and it's going to be a special type of group. We're going to call this a global group. Now, in Microsoft, global groups help us organize our users based on the type of roles that they have. So you might have accountants, you might have finance, you might have HR, you might have a variety of different groups out there, instructors, students, if you're in an academic setting, something of that nature. So what we're going to do is we're going to either create a new global group to, once again, define the role of this employee. Now, if the group has already been created, and of course you should probably check up on this. I think this is where we disconnect from a good practice to a bad practice. Often I see a lot of people creating new groups without recognizing that there are already existing groups. And it's unfortunate that this happens because in the end we end up with tens of thousands of groups, group bloat, groups that have poor documentation. We have people that belong to all sorts of groups for same reasons, and all we can do is just create that one more group because it's too confusing. It becomes a spaghetti mess of stuff that we have to deal with. So this being said, what we need to do is recognize the existence of a group that meets our needs, or we go out and create a group. Now that being said, I think the best approach, if you guys really want to clean up your environment, is to maybe use some proper IT service management practices, to use some processes like change management, which means that before you create a group that you have to get authorization to create the group, that you just don't simply create the group, and that someone must say, we already have a group that actually meets those needs for these requirements, it's documented, and you could use that existing group, or, you know what, we don't have that group, and in this particular case, we're going to have to go out and create the group. Now, once the group is created, we're going to add the account to this global group, and this is pretty much everything that an account administrator has to do. They don't have to do anything more than that. I think it would be imprudent to allow our account administrators to go beyond this role. I mean, in small organizations and even medium-sized organizations, your account admins will have other roles as well. But I'm really trying to separate the tasks and associate those tasks with roles, so that if you're doing the account admin's role, that here are the tasks that you should be performing. If it's a small organization, you also have another role, well, there's other tasks you'll be performing there as well. So the other role that I want to define in terms of account administration is something called a resource admin. And let me define exactly what I mean by resource admins. Now, of course, your organization will have more than one resource. They're going to have databases, they're going to have applications, they're probably going to have information that is stored up on a file server someplace, printer services, internet connections, just to give you a sort of like an idea, a general idea of what a resource is. And for a lot of these resources, what we want to do is we want to protect it. We want to make sure that not just anyone can read certain content. Certainly, if it comes to HR documents or contracts that we're bidding on, or perhaps we have some customers of our own that have a special documentation that requires a certain amount of confidentiality. We want to store this somewhere. We only want to allow certain authorized individuals to get access to that. Now, in an organization that is an enterprise class or a distributed organization where you might have a few offices here and there, it's quite common to have resource administrators set up their own file servers and their own print servers and their own internet connections and whatever the case may be. Now, these resource administrators have no idea who's being hired, who's being fired, who's been promoted or demoted, who's been sent on a special mission, or who's been sent from one department to another department. They have no idea what's going on here. And these resource administrators need to manage their resources. And if you compute or even sit down and think about the total amount of resources we have, every file, every folder, every printer, every application, everything that can have permissions associated with it, you realize that there are literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions of this kicking around. So there's no way on earth that a resource administrator should have to worry about what's going on with personnel. Staff related issues should be handled by HR and account admins. And we streamline it in that manner. So as a resource administrator, if I were setting up a network, or I have a network already in place, and I want to go in and, I don't know, maybe provide access to a particular resource, let's set up a server right over here, and this server is going to be a print server. And so this print server needs to be protected so that only specific people can get access to it. Now this is a high volume printer, and it can print color, it can staple, it has high resolution capabilities, and we're going to want to limit who can actually use this device, as the resources required for it have a high cost. So this being said, what we're going to do is we're going to have the resource administrator provision the server, set up the printer, and manage access to that. And as to managing the access to that, it becomes the tricky part. So the tricky part here is that the resource admin needs to receive information from the business identifying who should have access to the printer. This is all based on the role associated with this individual. So what I want to do here is I want to identify that maybe there is a group, a global group that was created by the account admins, such as maybe a marketing group. Now, the marketing group, we're going to give them access to this particular resource. Now, to do this, we need to sit down at the server and we need to manage the groups. And this is done by using the local administrative interfaces of this particular system. And the one tool in particular would be the local users and groups tool that you'll find in your server manager application. Now, in local users and groups, we're going to create a local group. Now, I'm going to prefix my group names with L, G, and that kind of stuff so that I understand that it's local or global or maybe even domain local or universal, as we have 4 different types of groups that we can create in Windows Server 2008. Now, the group I want to create is a local group. It's local because it resides on this server, and it doesn't reside anywhere else, and it cannot be accessed anywhere else for usage or manipulation or management. Unless we're doing remote management of this system, and so we can remotely connect to it and then of course manage the membership of this local group. Now this being said, I'm going to create a local group here called Marketing Print Users. I know it's a lengthy name, but with that name I know, firsthand that this is in fact a local group. Secondly, I know that this has something to do with the marketing group. I know that it has, some sort of definition here that says that this is a print users, not a print managers or print administrators, but print users. Now, people here will be able to submit print jobs, and they'll be able to manage their own jobs in the print queue, but they won't be able to manage any other employees' print jobs, just their own. Now, what I'm going to do is once I create this local group, I'm going to add the appropriate global group to this local group. So it's a little bit of group nesting capability here where myself as an administrator, I will add the global group marketing to the list. And then assign the appropriate permissions to this group. So I will give them print permissions. Not manage printers, not manage documents, just print permissions. They don't get full control in this particular case. So now that I've set this up, I have taken the global group and added this global group over to the local group, and I've given the local group print permissions. Now, in fact, this becomes a huge advantage to all administrators because we've got the people dealing with the staff up top, the account admins, and we have some administrators here dealing with the resources. Split that down 2 ways, it's fantastic. Let's say we hire a new employee. Her name is Mary. And now what we need to do is we need to go in and grant Mary access to this printer. The only thing that we need to do is ensure that HR notifies our account admins that Mary's been hired, and Mary is now part of the marketing department. So as such, based on the requirements of what is stipulated in the HR request, we can actually go create the account Mary, so I'll go ahead and I'll do that. So Mary is created, and then I'll organize Mary in a global group, G-marketing, and I'm done. I don't have to visit the print server. I don't have to visit the 15 print servers that exist in my organization, and I don't have to identify whether or not the permissions have already been set. This job has already been handled by the resource administrators. So the amount of hands-on activities from the resource administrators is greatly reduced. By such, we have ourselves a highly optimized environment where we minimize the amount of administration down to just creating accounts and organizing them in global groups. And anytime a new resource is required, we will provision the resource, we will set up the permissions and access controls to the resource, and then that is it. We don't need to micromanage that resource anymore. We can minimize the micromanagement of all these resources across the global scale. Perfect, thank you.